I think this is weird for all of us. Um, and that's okay. Uh, so I don't think there are any rules of the road here, um, other than my gratitude that anybody is here to hang out with me for a little bit.
I just want to start with one thing, which is, Andrew, what you did and what you shared was so profoundly brave. And, we've all had friends that dealt with things and didn't tell them anybody and didn't know how to share it. And then we wished we'd known so we could have done things. And like my immediate reaction was just that I wanted to thank you for making that step. And a bunch of people will be here tonight. A bunch of people have asked to see videos. What's interesting about the larger network that you have is there's all kinds of people in it that I've never met. Like you've touched all. So anyway, I haven't arranged with anybody to. There's no been There's no organization. People can just jump in, talk, ask questions. Andrew, you can tell stories. Like I don't think that there's a right or wrong way to do this, other than the fact that I'm delighted that on a Thursday night before the holiday, you all made the time to be here. And uh, with that, I open the floor to anyone that would like to begin.
As I was coming on, I heard you say, sorry, Dale, did you want to go?
Sure, happy to. You're a good follow-up act, Dorian. As most of you know, Andrew and I have had a collaboration for what, about 20 years, Andrew?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
I was running New Directions for News. Andrew was running the Media Center at the American Press Institute. And he had this idea that we should merge and come together, which we did, into this entity called We Media. So we came together and blew things up in a hurry, and became We Media, whatever that means. I mean, you remember the sort of digital comedian Z Frank?
Yeah.
Z Frank would talk about our big weenus, which we always got a kick out of. But we were kind of a non-traditional kind of analysts and advisors, and it shouldn't have worked, but it did. I mean, we had a very simple business plan, and Andrew can elaborate on that. The business plan was avoid working with assholes. And we mostly were able to do that, which I think maybe led us to this time and place now. But it's been a collaboration, more than a collaboration. It became really a close friendship over 20 years. And I don't know how many partners can really say that, but ours was. We were friend and business associates at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna hold off and let other people say things. But yeah, undoubtedly. I would also just add part of our secret sauce was we didn't really know what we were doing.
It still don't.
That's how you learn.
Yeah, in retrospect, so many decisions we made were nuts. And maybe if we'd had more advisors, they would have steered us away from things we did. And thankfully we didn't, because we did them. There was a lot of alchemy to how we worked. And I think that reflected our brains as much as our ignorance.
Do that.
That needs it.
I'm not going to call on people. I'm not going to be people can just jump in when they're ready.
I just wanted to say thank you to Andrew and to Dale. And as you speak about advisors who may have advised against something, I'm pretty sure you never try to repeat the 100 attendees all having a microphone at an event. That was sort of the in-between space before the metamorphosis
Uh-huh.
event. But it was a very eye-opening, enlightening experience for me. Um, not just around how to manage logistics, but I thought it was clear there was energy in that room and in subsequent rooms, and it was just this sort of collection of possibilities. And I always felt um, yeah, honored to be in the room with people that were doing things that were brave and curious and thoughtful. And I think that reflects you guys especially. And I just wanted to, thank you for bringing me along for the ride for a few years.
Can you tell us more about the 100 microphones story?
There was an event, Esther, I think you were there. Um, I thought maybe not. There's a bit of a blur, but we made sure that everybody is at these different tables and everybody could hit the button to talk into their microphone at any point. So instead, it was sort of everybody was an attendee and a panelist at the same time. And that one was called that was Mediamorphosis, if I got that correct.
Yep.
And then a lot of pieces from that started, I feel like, to kind of gel a bit, and then the subsequent We Media conversations I think were happening after that.
I'm from Andrew's part of life at the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. So, but I greatly admire journalists and the media. I guess, Andrew, you would have been at NCRC for about half a dozen years. And, the relationship I had with Andrew grew. I'm Josh Silver, by the way. The relationship I had with Andrew grew over the years. At first, I mean, we're both very driven professionals. And at first, I don't know exactly what happened, but I thought that I needed to make an offer of friendship. So I offered Andrew a cup of coffee. And I don't remember whether I ever got him a cup of coffee. But as years went by, it was not only mutual respect, it was admiration. And it was also working together and really enjoying each other. And towards the end, and I don't work every day at NCRC anymore. I'm a consultant for them. But towards the end of my regular being a staffer at NCRC, Andrew and I worked up together on a project. And this project, I think, was near and dear to both of our hearts. There at NCRC, we care about something called the Community Reinvestment Act that requires banks to serve low and moderate income communities. And banks actually get a report card on how many loans and investments they're making in underserved communities. And part of this is financing small businesses. So what I'm driving at is Andrew approached me one day and said, how about minority-owned media? Could we get CRA to help increase the financing for minority-owned media? Because local media in general is taking such a hit in this country, I think, to a great detriment to our democracy and an informed citizenry, but particularly in communities of color, it is really important. And I said, Andrew, this is a great idea. So Andrew and I worked on it, assiduously together, and we tried to convince the federal regulators to do more than they ended up doing on this. But it was, I just really enjoyed the project, and it was a really great culmination of working with Andrew. And since, I left NCRC and Andrew left NCRC, we've kept in touch virtually. I love you, brother. And what you've done in the last few weeks is amazingly courageous, and, being open about this. And, you'll be in our hearts. And I just want to say that.
Thank you.
Sure, of course.
I I had the pleasure of writing and researching and doing other things under your tutelage. And I remember, trying to figure out how Z Frank and David Plouffe and, you know, these other guys, like what was the connecting thread? And then when I went, not only did it make sense, but I still, you know, I don't know how many conferences, et cetera, I go to, but I still remember conversations from that room, you know, with Audie Cornish or with Roger Black or with you, you know, it's, and to me, that's impact, right? I mean, like, you know, something about that room and the spark that you kindled and the flame that you generated. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be cliche, but you know, I really appreciate that. And I really think that's one small illustration of the things that you've, you know, grown and cultivated and nurtured. And you know, I deeply appreciate that.
Thanks. I mean, you know, I could talk about that, but I won't say much about it. But the, the idea of what I call cross-sector connections was always a motivator for me. I was always bored by industry conferences, meaning people from the same industry who all had the same language, all had the same point of view, with, you know, minor variations, but their day-to-day work was more or less digging in the same trenches. That's boring to me. Much more interesting are people who are adjacent, working on challenges that have, I don't know, technical connections or cultural connections, but they're not putting them together. And I enjoyed smashing those things together and seeing what came out of it. That's the, you know, the short and simple version of what I was playing with.
You know, Andrew, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for everything you've done. I mean, for me at least, the We Media project and what you guys did, I think without that, would be there'd be a huge gap in understanding and in carrying forward, you know, kind of the importance of informing a democracy. You know, that was really at the core of it, and that does cross a lot of streams. And I also want to thank you for what you wrote. You're still giving, so thanks for all of that.
Thanks. And I will say, you know, various people said I was brave. I will admit that I felt like I was sticking my neck out. And that's been true with anything about cancer. It's always scary to put such a personal thing into the public sphere. I don't know why it is, but it is.
Yeah, thank you for
Well-
doing that. In fact, I just want to add just one more thing to that. It's even like reaching another generation. So my daughter's doing a bioethics symposium at Yale right now, and she's in med school, and she read it and she was just really touched.
Oh, thank you.
Because I think a lot of people do keep silent, and a lot of people need to hear it.
I mean, there's one aspect that is clear to me, and that's the professional piece. So, you know, I'm 57. I wasn't planning on wrapping up my work life at this point. But once you tell the world you're really sick, that changes how the world looks at you.
And that's partly what your courage is about, to take on that burden, because what you're really doing is leaving something behind, not just disappearing the way so many people do. And So what you've done, both in your work and also now, is what you're leaving behind.
I can also see how Andrew got attracted to the Community Reinvestment Act, because what he just said is he likes an interdisciplinary approach and smashing things together. And the Community Reinvestment Act, you just can't make home loans and make people homeowners, because low and moderate income communities have so many other needs. They have food deserts. They need grocery stores. They have a deficit in childcare, healthcare facilities. Just go down the list. So you have to be holistic. But also, if you expand it, the media infrastructure, there's a lack of a media infrastructure in underserved communities. So that was a keen insight that I think that, a lot of us, and I love journalists. I read the newspaper voraciously, and I'm a make pretend columnist. I put stuff on Substack. Um, but um, um, thinking for years, I was doing community reinvestment work, and I never really thought about media. But it is so important to inform people in overlooked communities that don't have an infrastructure for informing them, and saying what this elected official is doing, or that elected official are doing, or that company is doing, or cultural events. So it just makes CRA even more richer. So, and it's interesting that's his philosophy, because it really carried over to the work that, us fair lending advocates were doing at NCRC.
And we're seeing the results of people not knowing what's going on right now, too.
Yeah, that's for sure. But sadly.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted me to reflect on success and failure, there's a lot of failure to reflect on.
Andrew, can I ask a favor? I mean, I think about when we got to know each other, and then as I knew we were going to be together tonight, I went and read your biography, and like you had this whole journey up before We Media. Like it would just be fun for you to take a minute or two and just like going back to like college. How did your world get shaped in this way where the word we became kind of, I don't know anyone who owns the word we more than you do. Owns is the wrong word, but inhabits it. So how did that happen?
Represents it.
Yeah.
Sure, I could try, but it's it's not a straight line. First of all, I wasn't career driven. So when I went to college, and I went to Dartmouth,
Go Big Green, let's go.
I wasn't, today college is all about your career path. Your major is a career path, and it determines your life path. And that was true in the 80s for a lot of people. It just wasn't for me. I didn't know what I wanted to do or be. There was one thing that I knew I was capable of, and that was writing. And I knew that from before college. I didn't know there was a career in that. I had dabbled in journalism in high school, meaning I had tried to write for my high school newspaper and I was rejected. And I thought, if I can't even write for my high school newspaper, what's the point of even going there? So I ignored journalism for a while. But then when I was in college, I got an internship. I think it was after my freshman year. And it was an internship at Children's Television Workshop, the producers of Sesame Street. And it was with one of their magazines, 321 Contact, which was a science and technology show, and they had a print publication. First of all, I didn't know what the word internship meant. I needed a job that summer, and this was something I found that paid me money. So it satisfied my needs, and I took it. And as it turns out, they had me write some articles. And as it turns out, it was a very small, fun, creative group of editors who I wound up working with. And it just lit me up. I loved it. I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed writing these articles. And I discovered that there was a way to get paid to do something that was fun and that I enjoyed. So then I started investigating what would it take to do something like this for a job later. And everybody told me, well, the first thing you want to do is work for your high school newspaper. And of course, I'd already missed that boat. So kind of immediately, I discovered that I had to carve my own path. That if I was going to do something that I enjoyed, I was going to have to figure it out and not follow a template. And I wish there was a template. I wish things were easier. It took me many years of kind of hacking away. After college, I wound up moving to Oregon. My first job was working for a small book publisher called Timber Press. They were a kind of they published horticulture, like technical horticulture books. I edited a book about a species of orchid, Paphiopedilum, the Bible of Paphiopedilum. Obviously wasn't my career dream job. Turns out it was a horrible job. But it was not even a foot in the door. Let's call it a toe in the door of something that had to do with words. Well, from there, because it was such a horrible job, I wanted another job. I found another job with a children's newspaper. So of all things, I had worked for a children's publisher in New York. I'd moved to Portland, Oregon. And of all things, there was a children's newspaper based out of Portland, Oregon called Young American. And of course, when I contacted them, they kind of had the same reaction, you know. Of all things, who would imagine that somebody living here in Portland had actually worked for a children's publication? So I went to work for them. And I actually became a staff writer, did articles, kind of learned the ropes. Figured out that that wasn't going to get me to the New York Times, but it did motivate me to actually go to grad school briefly. So I tried to get a master's in journalism, and the point of getting a master's was to get a real job for somebody who wrote for adults. And about 6 months into my grad school, I took the test for the Associated Press and I passed it, and the bureau chief in Portland offered me a job. So I quit. I quit grad school the next day and went to work as a reporter for the Associated Press. And that's really where my working life as a journalist began. I'll cut this story off there because there were lots of zigs and zags after that. But suffice it to say, I didn't stick with that too long. I did it for a few years. But I was a geeky journalist the whole time. I had been, using technology and computers and the internet before there was a web. One thing led to another, and I wound up being one of the early online journalists, just as the web was being created. And what that meant was it didn't take very much to be called an expert. It was a lie. I knew very little, but I knew just a teeny tiny bit more than the next guy. And in a sense, we media followed from that.
Well, Andrew, I'll just add something. I'm his wife, Jenny, by the way. So thank you for doing this. But I think Andrew, having been with you all along that journey, I think what was important is that you saw the future before it happened, because like when you were working for the Kansas paper and things were starting to go online, you kind of saw that like everything is going to be moving online. And so I think seeing the future before other people realized what was happening was a pretty important part of your journey. From my perspective, I am not a journalist at all, but that's how I saw it, Andrew. You saw things before other people did.
Oh, yeah. I can speak to that, and that's what I was planning to say. I'm Rich Jaroslavsky, for those who don't know me. And I've been thinking back, particularly since I read Andrew's post about how and when we first met. And I'm not, it was a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure I remember. And when I currently teach class, I've taught for several years now at the University of California on the history of online news, because I kind of lived through it. And one of the things that I teach my students and they never fail to be incredulous at this, was the hostility and ignorance that the beginnings of online news received from within the industry. There was a survey, I can't remember if we did this at the Online News Association or who did it, a survey that showed that the most skeptical segment of people that we surveyed about the credibility and future of online news was within the news industry. I used to be marvel at this and be totally flummoxed at this. But the New York Times would every 2 weeks, it seemed like the New York Times would have a story on the front page discovering some new major crisis problem with the web. There was porn on the web. There were scams on the web. And I used to say that they were putting together an informal series that they would enter for a Pulitzer under the title "The Internet, Ew." And
Yeah.
it was I'd go to speak to publisher groups, and I'd go to speak to and I had some credibility. I was the managing editor of the Wall Street Journal Online. I was, and I would be greeted with skepticism and often downright hostility, which, looking back on it, was probably rooted in fear. But it made me question the entire industry that I'd already been a part of for 20 years at that point. And I remember, Andrew, I think you invited me out to API, and I sort of rolled my eyes and went, API? I mean, I'm just, these are this is ground zero for the troglodytes. And I remember marveling that there was this guy at the American Press Institute, which I never expected, who got it, who understood, and who was trying from within the belly of the beast to change those attitudes and to move a very reluctant industry towards what was going to be its inevitable future. And I remember coming away from that going, maybe there is hope for the future. Because there's somebody here who's in a position of responsibility who gets it. And I imagine that you, like me, have a lot of the scars from those days. But the fact, I can't tell you how heartening it was for me, who felt like I was on the front lines and oftentimes felt like there weren't a whole lot of other people out there with us. To know that there was somebody like you in that position, who understood what was happening and understood what was going to happen and saw the future. And for that, I have held you in highest esteem and respect for 30 years, going on 30 years. And I just wanted to say that, what your wife said is entirely correct. You saw the future, and you were one of the brave ones. And, judging from what's going on today, and from what you've posted, and the way you're facing this, all I can say is you're still one of the brave ones, and I'm in awe.
Thank you.
Can I chime in?
Of course.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. I wanted to echo that about Andrew. I have known Andrew for probably, gosh, 20 years. We met, I think, at the beginning of the digital publishing industry, and I was helping publishers monetize, and I was producing iMedia summits, and we stayed in touch. I think the last time we spoke at the same conference was maybe in Miami, and we stayed in close touch and had so many kind of family stories in common, our kids playing baseball and taking us all over the world. And one of the things that really struck me about Andrew's open-mindedness and his ability to think futuristically, like Rich had mentioned, was I remember when you tried a new business model with We Media and you launched the One Thing. And I always loved that approach, like cut through the clutter, focus on the basics and the foundation. And I pulled it up because I actually saved it in my email from many years ago. And by the way, 2017, Andrew was launching a newsletter and trying a new membership approach. So before Substack. So again, ahead of the time, ahead of the curve, he was really innovating back then. But one of the things you talked about in your email introduction to launch the One Thing said that you were obsessed, and they were evolving into needing a new type of digital midlife. And you said this newsletter is for people like me who crave signs of humanity, compassion, and authentic voices in the digital shout storm. And I still think that applies to all of us. And I really appreciate how you constantly experimented and tried new things, and you always listened and have feedback when I emailed you about my new things and adventures. And I just so appreciate you and our collaboration and our friendship. And it's really nice to get to know you too, Jenny.
Thank you.
So Rebecca had talked about that newsletter, which I had totally forgotten about, and reminded me of my daily letter that I get, or email I get now, the 1440. And I had forgotten that, which then reminded me about WeSpace, and again, ahead of the time, right? A space for people to share and to co-work, and again, no one was doing that at that time. By the way, I'm Greg. I live a little over a mile from Andrew, and Andrew, Jenny, and the boys are family friends. We actually probably met 20-some years ago, as Andrew and Jenny's oldest, Eli, is same age as our youngest, Zofia. And I don't know if we met at school or exactly how it happened, but over the years, kept in touch. And I was fortunate enough. Andrew and Dale had me come and speak at API. It was API and wrestling, if I remember correctly, right? And that was kind of like, I can imagine Andrew sitting there going, "Oh yeah, I did do that. Oh yeah, I did do that." And that was a memory that came back, that they had asked me to come and speak, and like, who is this person, me, that someone wants to hear talk about? I believe it was around open source, which was my my big thing that's driven a lot of my work stuff. But I want to thank Andrew, and our friend Marco, who is traveling right now, and then 5 or 6 hours ahead of us, so middle of the night. But we would get together on a semi-regular basis to just have coffee at the Lake Ann Coffee House, which was walking distance for me and Andrew, and it was an opportunity for a couple of guys, a few guys to get together and just sort of talk about life and, family and what was going on in the world, and always looked forward to those. As Andrew, being a reporter and being in the media, had much more insight to what was going on in the world. And I thank him for enlightening me and opening me up to those new things. And I did share his letter. My mom is a multi-year cancer survivor, multi-time cancer survivor, and I shared that letter, or the page article you wrote, and very much moved her and touched her. And one of the things, if you are okay with, we can talk about later, but I'd love to be able to share that or put it over with Life with Cancer, which is a huge nonprofit here in Washington, D.C. area that does a lot of great outreach and my personal experience with them. But I really think that that could be helpful for people. And again, yet another thing that Andrew has done, as a, I don't know if it's the first, but definitely not common. So again, thank you for all that. And again, thank you for the time. And, as I will say, I try not to bug you every day, just, twice a week, to say, if there's anything you need, please just reach out. I'm just around the corner. So thank you, Stephen, for putting this together also. I appreciate that.
Yeah, never bugs me. Thank you.
Is it okay if I jump in?
Of course.
I've known you for far less time, Andrew, and so for the benefit of most of the folks on here, Andrew and I met when I joined NCRC in 2020. So it was like September of the pandemic, which is a weird time to be meeting people that you work with, because I actually didn't get to meet anybody in person for a long several months after that. But I think one of the things that that struck me most about like the first time that we actually had like a real conversation is that I like a lot of people that I've worked with in the nonprofit sector, and that's not where my career has always been, have been very head down on whatever the thing is that they do, sort of very, very focused on it. But, to your point, previously, kind of like talking in the lingo of whatever it is your sector is about, not so much about things that are broader. And I just recall thinking, gosh, like, you're like so much bigger in this space, and like so super normal in comparison to like a lot of the very like, sector specific wonky people that we would otherwise have to work with. And it always felt like really just refreshing to be able to like go sit in your dimly lit office, to have what felt like a normal conversation in someone's living room, that was also like with the mood lighting. Yeah, I mean, I think I just, it was an interesting time for me from a career perspective, because I also wanted to be able to do things that, to just make the world a better place, not to be too like, cheeky about it. But now that I'm at a different company, you should know that that sort of focus on narrative and storytelling is something that I've certainly carried with me. And while we now at Prosperity Now do think about what we say and how we say it and how we can talk to people in ways that meet them where they are instead of, in the lingo of whatever it is that we do. We're actually producing a documentary that is like in large part inspired by a lot of the way that you like talk about communicating with people. So I really appreciate that. And have just appreciated your easy, affable way. So, it's nice to have worked with a colleague who is like really smart, but not braggadocious about it.
Thanks, Marisa. It's nice to see you too.
I wanted to say something about the word confidence. We've talked about bravery. We've talked about clarity of vision with the future. And I think that in my experience, and Marissa, the way you were talking about working with Andrew, I had that privilege several years prior to you, but the osmosis of being at API with the troglodytes and with everybody, and then being able to take you kind of internalize what you're hearing and have a picture of what the future is, or at least a theory of the case, which gives you a solid footing to stand on when you're making that case. I saw so many people come through there and then feel emboldened, maybe validated, or maybe they're changing their perspectives. But then there was this other part of my job where I would be the late crew when they would go out in the evenings and drink, when we would have seminars. And one night I got so emboldened, I told a group of newspaper folks that were, had websites. I said, you should destroy all of your websites. And they went, what? And I said, you should start them up as mobile websites and build them out again from there. And it was because of the clarity of the vision of where we were heading. I was learning about what was happening in South Korea because I was working in Reston with Andrew and with Dale. And those things have only built upon themselves. And so I think a lot of people have just felt a lot more reassured about what's possible because of what they've experienced working with you guys. So thank you.
So if no one else has anything, I'd love to hear more about what you think we should learn. What do you want to tell us now? What would you like us to carry forward that you can't get to?
Well, that's a really big question you just asked, given the moment we're in.
I know.
And the truth is, this moment has been a long moment. And I've felt lost for a number of years. So I don't have the singular, clear sense of direction about the universe that I did 15 years ago. I'm struggling with chaos. I'm struggling with power, which was always context for any discussion about media and an informed society. But now it is the definition of how our culture is being organized. And I'm less comfortable with that. I mean, I'm personally less comfortable with it. I'm less adept at that world. I'm less comfortable with people who are obsessed with power. So I guess point one might be seeking and figuring out how to play in that world is more important than it was for me when I started playing with the future. A second idea that does float, and maybe other people can do something with it. We've lost joy. We're in such a grim, power obsessed experience right now. That the notion of joy is fading, and joy was always part of what motivated me. It still is. And by joy, I don't mean generic joy. Joy is good, yay joy. I mean our information experiences, the way, like the idea of doom scrolling. I doom scroll all the time now, but in fact, that's the only scrolling I do. There's no scrolling that isn't doom scrolling. I used to. I mean, like even Instagram used to be fun, and it's not fun anymore. Now it's just Instagram. So I don't know, a quest for some frivolity or some experience that's uplifting. And maybe part of the secret there is it's not news, it's not information. Maybe it's fiction, it's narrative, it's something other than the domains that power is crammed into. I don't know. These are loose threads, but I feel lost, and I used to think of myself as a sense maker, and I've struggled to make sense of the world we're living in now. So maybe that's a quest that I would hand off to the next generation, is to try to make sense of this madness that we're living through. And I know that's not a real answer. That's an evasion.
Well, it's a good challenge.
I see a lot of faces of Andrew friends that haven't shared a story yet, and I want to make sure everyone who has some memory, it doesn't have to be a big thing. I just want to make sure we hear other voices.
I would like to. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Why don't you go? You go ahead, and I'll be next.
Thank you, Andrea. Hi, everyone. I would like to share with you that I met Andrew, I don't know, 2005, I think, in Indianapolis. I don't know if you remember, Andrew.
I do.
When I was surprised by his presentation about media and about news and the future of the news over internet and all those fascinating things. And after that, I took something that he said and of his ideas about everything, and I went again to We Media in Miami, and after that I tried to give to our people here in Argentina some of the things that Andrew was speaking about at that conference. That was very, very interesting, and I think it was a great opportunity for us here to share with him some time and to share the build of a project that was We Media here in Argentina, that was very, very difficult to try to have good speakers from USA and other countries that at that moment had much more information about what's going on with media and newspapers and the future of information. And I think that vision, that clear evidence that Andrew had allow us to share with a lot of people a lot of information that was great. And I will also, sorry Andrew, my English is so as bad as it was in 2005, but I will also share with you that a personal thing, and how how Andrew touches my life, because that event was very important for me, because it was in a moment that I recently lost my job, so I put all my effort in create an event that could be so good as the one they did at London a few years before. So Andrew allowed me to put all my effort and to create something interesting. And I think that Andrew, you touched me personally, and I appreciate very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I'll say. I'm glad we could do that.
I wanted to jump in as well. Hey, Andrew. So I guess I don't know when we met. I don't. We met when the iPad came out, and the reason I know that is because you hosted a panel about the iPad and digital publishing, which is where I first met you. Of course, I had known of you for a while because you were kind of the big man on campus in the New York, media scene. So I'd known of you for a while before then. And so, we haven't spent a ton of time over the years since then between cities and moving and so forth. But speaking of joy and, and so forth, the time we have spent together, I greatly appreciated, greatly enjoyed every time I saw you, and I had a chance to bounce ideas around. And actually, I think, when I think about it, I think one of my past startups, Stay Life, in our pitch deck with a couple of quotes from We Media in there as part of our presentation. I'm sure we weren't the only startup which had quotes from We Media and them as well. So on behalf of all the startups that raise money, thank you for that. And I actually wanted to ask you a question to kind of build off of Esther's question, but in a much smaller scale, short-term way, which is like, what can we do for you in the next, in a small way in the coming weeks? Like, you have this captive audience here, a bunch of folks who respect you, care about you. Is there anything we can do for you personally, for Jenny, your family, for a stranger, something we can pay forward? This is your chance. You have this captive audience here.
That's a really kind question. I don't have an answer for that tonight. I didn't come here. I don't want to answer a question like that tonight. I'll give that some thought. This is a very personal time for me. And things are getting very small for me right now. And that's one of my challenges, actually, is shutting down my big thoughts to focus on my small thoughts. There's all sorts of unfinished business. I'm gonna not answer it, but I will think about it if there's something that a group of good friends might do. Locally, I've got a great support community of friends who are helping me and my family. But I'm sorry, I'm gonna pass on the big ask. I just can't do it. It's a beautiful question, and I wish I had a list of 3 things that I'm gonna ask for, which I guess if this were a pitch, maybe that's how it would work. But I just didn't think of tonight like that.
Andrea, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm a former journalist, now a nurse, and I had the privilege of working at We Media for a few months. I live in Reston, right less than a mile from the old API building. And one thing that I loved about just meeting Andrew and Dale was just the sense of fun and curiosity about the web and about journalism. And for me at that time, that was so important. This is back in like RSS feed days. So that's what, like 2007, maybe? I feel like RSS feeds really mark the time. But that sort of like positivity and curiosity really stayed with me. It helped me when I went to go work at the Washington Post, and all anyone wanted to do was just complain about how Twitter was so stupid and, you know, meaningless. Well, it was actually eating their lunch. And honestly, as you talk about the future, Andrew, in response to Esther's question, I still carry that sense of curiosity that you shared. And I think, yeah, it's really hard to make sense of everything right now, but coming at it with that sense of joy and curiosity and community has meant a lot to me. So thank you.
Thanks, Andrea.
Who did we miss?
I'll say a thing or two. Andrew and I have largely been ships in the night for years.
Yeah.
We've communicated for years. And roughly 20, maybe a little more than 20 years ago, I published something through API. And it was called The Culture of Connectivity and Immediacy. And oddly enough, people say, oh, you're the culture of connectivity guy. And I never say to them, you left out a word. But through API, I published that, and it really had reach, or at least the people it reached remembered it. And I had been blogging, and blogging was just my friends knew my blog. And I was on a bunch of blog roll, and that was my friends' friends. But API reached people, and it reached people that I wanted to reach. In, you know, we'll call it an expanded community that meant something to me. That wouldn't have happened without API. And some of the people I met through API, Chad was very helpful on that. And Gloria, I'm actually surprised Gloria isn't here. So that's something I mean, I appreciate it. And even though we've been ships in the night, I appreciate our correspondence.
Thank you, so do I.
So I have a feeling that this will be the beginning of a whole bunch of parallel conversations in all kinds of directions. And people that weren't here tonight will ask to see the video. And then you'll, you know, at some point, Andrew, you'll have to say to us, hey, enough, or I need my, like, because by opening yourself up in this very generous way, I think what you're going to find is this is like a pebble in a pond. And there are going to be all kinds of people that want to reach out and connect and reconnect and share and say, wait, I didn't get to come. That being said, you know, this is the beauty of this piece of technology that we now have, which is we didn't all have to do planes, trains, and automobiles to be able to sit together and, you know, create essentially a pop-up community of friends of yours. And, you know, if 2 weeks from now, a whole bunch of people that didn't come tonight want to gather again, I'll reach out to you and say, hey, do you want to do this again? And you may say, I'm not up to it, or you may say that would be lovely. But I want to thank you for agreeing to do this and for being part of it. And I think a lot of people will read that letter you wrote, and at some point in their life feel empowered to write something like that because they remembered that you did it. And that's a great gift.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. This means a lot to me. It's giving me energy. I don't know how I'll be feeling 2 weeks from now. I don't know how I'll be feeling tomorrow. But it's really just very moving to be able to see and talk with this group tonight. It's like wind in my sails, and I'm just grateful.
You mean a lot to us.
Thanks.
So all right, everybody. As a former television producer, I do like to end on time. Everyone, I'll send you the link. There's a video, you can share it. I don't think there's anything here that, Andrew, you don't mind being out in the larger community. So
no, it's all good.
All right, sounds good. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.